Welcome to the Spirit-Centered Business Podcast, where we blend the spiritual with the practical for supernatural results. Now, here is your host, Bralynn Newby.
Hello there. Welcome to Spirit-Centered Business. I am so excited to introduce you to a brand new guest today. And you're going to love his story. You're going to love what he's doing in the world. Bradford Carlton, welcome to Spirit-Centered Business.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today.
Of course. I love that you have your own podcast. You're waking people up in your own way, but we want to hear your story. So let's start out with, how did you not necessarily come to faith, unless that's a big kind of contributor to how you came out of church and came into kingdom, into the deeper things of God?
Certainly. So, how I came to faith is an integral part of my
Okay,
story.
go for it then.
We'll get there. But it's my path was interesting. It's very non-traditional. My mother was raised Southern Baptist, and all she remembered growing up was hellfire and brimstone. That was it. And my dad was raised Catholic, and all he remembers is them asking for money all the time. So when they got together, the two of them decided, well, we're not going to raise our children that way at all. We'll let them figure it out when they get older. And so I essentially grew up in an agnostic house. They didn't want to teach us anything. My grandmother, who Southern Baptist, good woman she is, would send us Bibles every birthday, Christmas, holiday, every chance she'd get, because, well, I got to teach the children, right? My parents would take those Bibles and they'd promptly donate them away because, well, we don't do that in our house. And so I remember when I was 7 years old, my grandmother was over for Christmas. The whole family was over, every extended relative that we had. And my grandmother grabs my brother and I. I'm 7, he's 4. She takes us to a bedroom. She locks the door and goes, "You don't want to go to hell, do you? It's fire and burning and brimstone and pain and torture and horribleness forever and ever. You don't want that, do you? Then you need to accept Jesus Christ into your heart right now." Okay. 7 years old, what I know, right? Well, yes, okay. So I said the words, and I think, as a lot of people find out in life, just because you say the words doesn't mean it's stuck, right? And so
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
me, it created an itch. There was something there, like, what was this about? Why did she have me do this? Who is this guy? And it wasn't until I was about 16 years old, I found a copy of the Bible my parents had not taken away. It was on a bookshelf way in the back, and it was covered in dust. They clearly hadn't used it. And so I'm like, I can take this. So I took it to the one place I was not going to be disturbed with it, which was school.
I was going to think bathroom. I'm like, what?
No, so I was the smart kid in school. I didn't have to try too hard. And so if I was sitting there reading something that wasn't on topic, my teachers didn't care. Like, whatever, he's going to get an A anyway. So I read it cover to cover over a couple of weeks. Got to the end of it and I go, you know what? This is a good book. Why doesn't anybody talk about this thing? Little did I know, right?
Wow.
So I can't say I accepted Christ into my heart then. I accepted his moral teachings. I thought it was all good because, again, I'm coming from that background with my parents. It wasn't until I was in law school, and again, I was trying to live by the code that Jesus set down. And I remember this one day, I was sick as a dog. I was so sick. I had 104-degree fever. I was thousands of miles away from anybody I knew because I'm in a new state going to school. I had no friends. I was kind of a shy guy back then. And I thought to myself, here I am in a recliner, 104-degree fever. No one has contacted me in days. I don't know where my phone is. I'm too weak to get up and get water. If something happens to me right now, like, this is it. This is the end. No one's going to come to save me. And I remember just being really down on myself, just this horrible feeling of depression because I felt so empty. And in that moment, it was as if I heard a voice. And this is my testimony. I heard a voice, and it had to have been Jesus. And he told me that everything I was feeling was unnatural. And in that moment, I knew the gospel was true. I accepted Jesus to my heart truly. And from then on, I was no longer shy. In fact, moments later, I felt healed. I was totally better. I was no longer shy. I ended up being class president in law school. Went on to go and work in all kinds of different jobs where I just rose through the ranks. I always became the leader wherever I was. And that led me into business. And so would you like me to continue that story of kind of how I do that, or what would you like to do now?
Well, actually, yes. And would you just give us like a snippet of your bio, like your current, like what you're all working on? Because I'm looking at your website and there's so much going on. You are involved in a lot of different things. And so if you just gave us a quick bio, I should have done it at the beginning, but it's all
All
good.
good.
That's all
So
good.
30,000-foot view. I
Yeah.
started out as an attorney. I went to law school, became an attorney.
Mhm.
I worked for the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, county court as a court administrator. I was actually the youngest named partner in the state of Ohio as well after all of that. It was when my wife nearly died in childbirth that the law practice we had built together essentially crumbled because she no longer wanted to go. She didn't want to go back to work. The baby came out. She looks at me and goes, "I'm not going back to work." And that was the end of our law practice. So I had to figure out what I was going to do, and I went into business consulting and coaching. And so for the past several years, I've worked with businesses all over the world. I think it's 50 different countries. I've referred over $3 billion of business funding needs to investors. I've worked with nonprofits. I've worked with athletes and celebrities. And so today, what was about 8, 9 months ago, I started a ministry focused on young men. And specifically because I heard this statistic, it absolutely blew my mind when I heard it, that, oh man, it's roughly 80% of suicides in the United States are men.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm sitting there like, why is that? Why would men specifically be killing themselves? And I had built up an audience during the pandemic online of 100 and some thousand followers, and it was all men. So I asked them, like, why would you even consider this? And I got 3 answers back, and the answers were because we're lonely, because we feel rejected by society, and we feel we don't have a purpose in life.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
knew instantly in my heart that the answer to all 3 of those things is Jesus Christ. If I can introduce some of these men to Jesus, maybe, just maybe, it would save a life. And if I can save just one, it'll all be worth it. And so I still do the consulting and I still do the content, and my content speaks to men and men's issues because the vast majority of my followers are not believers. And so I have content for them to keep them to be followers. And I have interviews and I have discussions about faith and God and how to be a Christian and what it means to be a Christian. And I don't know if I've converted anybody or if they've been converted, I should say, but I'm just gonna keep putting it out there.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And sometimes I want to just give you the encouragement that sometimes it's not you converting them, but you making an atmosphere where an evangelistic kind of person can come in, and the seed that they plant lands because
That's right.
you've turned up the soil.
That's
You've
right.
made them conducive to hearing the word of the Lord, like you've opened ears or eyes into what the Lord wants to say through someone else. And so I give you very much encouragement. Keep going, keep going. You're doing great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's there's a parable for every season of our life, isn't there? And so
Yeah,
I know in
yeah,
this one, it's the parable of the sower because I'm putting it out there.
right.
And there are a lot of haters. There's a lot of people who don't want you talking about Christianity or faith in any respect. And so I get a lot of haters on that aspect.
Yeah,
And I know, that's the crows and that's the weeds, right? But there's a
right.
few, and I may never see them, but they may grow. And I think like Johnny Appleseed back in the day. No one talks about Johnny Appleseed anymore. He was a real guy. He was a real guy who went around planting seeds, tending to them, and then the vast majority of them grew, and he never knew about it because he ended up dying.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Good boy, that brings back a childhood story, right? Johnny Appleseed.
And he was a true man of faith. He carried his Bible everywhere he went.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. So when you're doing the consulting and coaching, how are you, like, what state are people in before they meet you and then say, "Oh, I need you," and then what do you do to get them to the transformation that they're looking for?
So the state they're in when they need me is well, it depends. When we're talking about business coaching, right?
Business coaching, yeah.
Okay. Usually they are in a state where they've been in business for several years. It could be 5 to 10 to 20 years.
Mhm.
And they've hit a plateau. And regardless of whatever endeavor you're doing, you're going to hit a plateau, and you need some sort of guidance or coaching to get past that. And so
Right.
they'll come to me, and almost invariably, the issue is a matter of mindset. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the processes or the skills they have. It's their own limited internal beliefs about themselves. And that's where I'm able to bring Jesus in, because he's expansive, he's infinite, he has that capability, and we have the ability to work with and through him,
Yeah.
or he can work with and through us as well. And to be able to open people's eyes. And nowadays, a few years back, I wasn't working with too many believers. And it seems like ever since I decided that I was going to be more focused on faith and more be willing to talk about it out loud, every single one of my clients has been Christian. And it's
Hmm.
not that I'm trying to discourage anybody. It's just they've been drawn to me, and I don't know, maybe it's the good Lord. I can't claim credit for it.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, we'll get into some nuts and bolts later. And yeah, that'd be great. So I want to continue now the story
Yes.
of you like taking things to a deeper level, reading the Bible in a supernatural kind of kingdom way. Like Jesus came to preach the kingdom, but what churches tell you is preaching the gospel, right? So I want to hear the story of how you kind of went deeper.
Sure. So growing up the way I did and coming into the faith the way I did, I when I did started going to churches, yeah, I had somebody tell me he has a Christian radio show. He tells me that there was a guy who came up to him one day, and he goes, "I would go to church if it weren't for all the hypocrites." And he said back to this other guy, "Well, there's always room for one more." And that's what it feels like going into churches often. Like,
Yes, that's
here's the
why I
text,
left.
here's the Bible, here's what Jesus said. You're not saying that exactly. I
Or you're not doing it.
or you're
Yeah.
not doing it. I just the other day I had somebody over at the house, and from my church. And I don't want to name names, obviously,
Sure. No.
and they were seriously bashing Catholics. And whether you agree with any of that or not, how's that an expression of love? It's not. Jesus's entire message was about loving everybody to the fullest extent possible. Love your neighbor as yourself. The second commandment after loving the God with all your heart, right?
Sure. Sure.
So where is that love? I don't know if it's because I was the way I was, or if I'm just I like the message of Jesus specifically. It's all about love, and if we're not expressing that love in everything we do in every way we can, we're not necessarily on message.
That's good. That's really good.
If I answer your
So,
question.
w- yeah, what would your verse be if you're grounding people into the Bible, and especially men who are seeking, and like you said, they're wounded, they're coming to you stuck, whatever. Where do you point them first?
So I do apologize. I'm not a chapter and verse person.
Oh, no,
I don't have
neither am
any of
I.
them
Neither am I.
memorized. It's
Yeah.
it's the one I just quoted, where I think it was a lawyer who came to Jesus, and he said, "What are the commandments we should follow?"
Yes. Okay.
And he says, "The first commandment is love the Lord your God and serve him above all others. And then the
Yeah.
second is to love your neighbor as yourself." And that's it. Those are the two that Jesus laid out. And of course, there's additional rules, but those are the commandments. Those are the things we're supposed to do. And in order for a man to be able to really understand what that means, he has to know what it means to love himself.
So true. That's good. Yeah.
And we don't teach that to boys anymore. I'm in all kinds of teachers forums because I talk about men's issues, and men's issues start when they're young boys. And so
Mhm.
to know who's interacting most with boys, it's the teachers, right? And so what are they saying about boys? It sounds like boys are just wild children. They're basically monkeys running around the classrooms who aren't being given any instruction, aren't being given any limits or any understanding of what it means to be a person, whereas the girls are perfect little angels there studying and doing what they need to. And what happens is these boys go through middle school, they go through high school, and they never got taught anything about what it means to be a man or what it means to be a person or
Mhm.
to love or any of this stuff, because they were just left on their own. And lo and behold, lot of men, the majority of men don't go to college. It's only 38% of college enrollees are men. The majority of them go into hard labor, menial positions. And then they
Oh,
have this high suicide rate because they just don't see a purpose in their life.
huh. I didn't realize that the majority don't go to college. And especially being a woman in the business field. I mean, in these last 10 years, yes, women are more likely to start businesses and to
Mhm.
do things like that. But historically, it's always been the men. So
Well, for
it's kind of
40
shocking.
years, for the past 40 years, college enrollees have been majority women. And the
Really?
gap between men and women
That's
has been growing
amazing.
every year.
Wow. Interesting statistic. Interesting. And you know what pops to my mind when you say these kinds of things is fatherlessness,
Yes.
because I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, maybe you do, that people in prison, like there's a huge percentage that are fatherless.
Yep. Almost
And
every single school shooter has no father in the home. The studies have all shown that when a father is in the home, regardless of whether it's a mother or not, if there's a man as a
Mhm,
father in the life of the child, that child is more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to
mhm,
graduate from college, more likely to get a good paying job, more likely to never engage in crime, more likely to have a spouse that they do not beat, and more likely to have children who are successful.
mm, I love that. And so let's just bring this back because Jesus came to reveal Father to us. Isn't that amazing that he
Absolutely.
knew that the importance of knowing your Father and knowing who we are in his eyes, that we are not orphans, we are not victims. He calls us, his treasured son, as son as in a positional title of
Yeah.
inheritance. And and so many men just don't know themselves as that treasured son, inheritor of the kingdom of God. So I love what you're doing, and that
Well, thank you.
men are finding you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
yeah, that's so good. Right. So if there were like a big lesson that you learned along your path of really pressing into who you are and what the Lord says who the Lord says you are and what he says you can do, and weaving that into your business, what would that be?
This one's an easy one for me. Pride. You
Mm,
you said you were looking at my website and I've done all these incredible things. I have done incredible things, but it's only through the good Lord that I was able to do them.
yeah.
And unfortunately, I did not learn that lesson until recently, because I would go through these cycles of just huge achievement. Like I said, I was the youngest named partner in the state of Ohio at a law practice. The firm I was at was 28 years old. I was 27 when they promoted me. And I wrote the literal book on the subject of elder law for the state of Ohio for attorneys to review and understand the law. And I went around teaching it. And I'm like, look at me, look how great I am and all that I have done, how smart I am. And every time I've ever done that, the good Lord has humbled me. And I needed it. I needed it because if I was not giving him the credit, then I was going to go down a bad path. I was going to be willing to enter into business deals I really shouldn't be able or I shouldn't have done. And it's just been over and over again. I've had contracts for millions of dollars, even from a young age, millions of
Wow.
dollars that I'm like, look at me, look what I've done, look what we've accomplished. And then nope, that contract isn't going to work out. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get your money now until you learn this lesson. And it's just been over and over again. And thankfully I've learned the lesson finally. So for anybody else out there, you have to give credit to the Lord. You have to give credit back to God and because he truly is where everything springs from. It's not you. We couldn't do anything. Oh, how does it go? We can't make a hair on our head go from black to white.
That's so good. You and I have a similar story. I haven't done as many things as you, but I was always a smart cookie. And I right out of college, I got a job with the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Mhm.
And my budget that I was in control of went from $5,000 to $60,000 to 1.2 million. And I earned 5 promotions in 6 years. And I was just like, thought I was all that. I got a Woman Making History Award. And, I was 24 years old, and I was in charge of guys who were like in their 50s. And,
and they're grumpy too, aren't they?
yeah. Oh my gosh. They did not want to hear that that we need to use more colors. You can't only have 8 on the entire campus. Yeah. So I did a lot there, and then I was hired away to GM, and I there was just a lot of that kind of relying on myself and relying on how intellectual, how smart I am, how well I can put a team together, how well I can do budgeting, how well I can manage. I managed up to 34 construction projects at one time. I mean, I had multi-million-dollar projects by the end of my career, but what I found was that was like a counterfeit destiny. Yes. Because I wasn't really connected to my heart. I wasn't really operating with who God said I was. I was only operating out of my head. Mm-hmm. So I hear that in you as well. But now you've got that, the humble attitude, but still, you're significant. That you can move things, shake things, influence things for the kingdom, but the power behind you.
And only through Christ. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so beautiful. Love that. Yeah, very good. Is there anything else you want to throw out here in this first segment before we jump into the rest of the story in segment 2?
Just real quick. So, back when I was in Ohio, after my wife had her moment and nearly died, that's when I switched from being an attorney to a consultant. One of the very first clients I got, I was not expecting to do any sort of preaching, none at all, because I'm in the mindset of business law, sure, business coaching, business consult. It's business, right? Mm-hmm. And I had this client that he invited me over to his store one day, and it was late at night. It was like 8:00 at night that he needed me to come over. That was the only time he could meet. And there I show up in a suit, just like this. Might have been this suit, actually. But there I am, and this place is full of people, and the store is closed at this point, but there are people, and they're all his friends, and they're all doing drugs, and they're all trying to fornicate, and they're all trying to do the stuff. And I'm trying to have a business conversation with the owner of this business. And I'm like, what is going on? And they're like, oh yeah, we just have a good time. And I sat down and I just started explaining what was in my heart that Jesus had shared with me. And all these people gathered around because they were listening, and they gathered around, they sat there, and some of them converted right there on the spot. Wow. And it's been from the very beginning. And I don't know why it took me as long as it did to come to terms with what I'm being guided to do. And sometimes you miss the signs, I think, and you just have to be willing to be open to it.
That's so good. Yeah, he who has eyes to see and ears to hear, because the Lord is putting opportunities in your path that align with your destiny and the way he created you. And also on the other side of you doing what he calls you to do, there's people that are waiting for you. So right. I'm so glad that you are encouraging other people to do that. And that you're doing it yourself. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think let's land the plane for this one, and we'll come back and we'll leave it. What do you want to talk about in your next one? Do you want to get into some of the things that you're doing right now, that how people can get a hold of you, or do you have a little gold nugget of teaching? How do you want to drop a cliffhanger for people to come back next week?
Oh my goodness. I don't know.
Okay, well, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm going to do it. You have to come back next week to hear the end of the story, because we're just going to flow with Holy Spirit and see what Holy Spirit does. And it's always good when that happens. So
that's right.
Thank you again, Bradford. How can people get a hold of you? And we didn't actually mention the name of your podcast. So go ahead and tell people this information?
Sure. The name of my podcast is Beacon in the Storm, but you can find it on YouTube under my name, which is Bradford Carlton or Dr. Bradford Carlton. Be aware that my interviews are faith-based. My other episodes are about men's content because, again, my audience are not necessarily believers. I have to keep them around somehow by using content that they're willing to watch.
No worries. Yep,
But
absolutely.
yeah, that's just find me that way, or you can reach out if you want to reach out. It's Bradford at bradfordcarlton.com.
Awesome. And your website is
bradfordcarlton.com.
Right. Okay. So Beacon in the Storm is the podcast. Are you on any other platforms other than YouTube?
I'm on Facebook, I do clips on TikTok. I have it's on Spotify as a podcast. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we will put all of this information in the show notes for Spirit Centered Business, wherever you're watching or listening to Spirit Centered Business, so that you can connect to Bradford on his platform and listen to his podcast. And do make sure that subscribe, share, like everything of Spirit Centered Business and of Bradford. So we'd appreciate that. And do catch us next time. And until then, stay Spirit Centered. Peace out.
Hey there, SCB peeps. I want to give a huge shout out and deep appreciation and thanks to Candace Benton. She has become a super sponsor for the Spirit Centered Business Show. So I would appreciate you helping me in sending blessings and abundance back to her. Thank you so much, Candace, and you are well loved.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Centered Business with Bralynn Newby. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The next stage of doing business by being spirit-centered is coming together in collaboration, working with spiritual principles and knowing our destiny. Join our tribe at spiritcenteredbusiness.com, and we'll catch you on the next broadcast. Peace out.